I'm going to invite you on a trip with me. In the summer of 2022, I went on a mini sabbatical. It was a 4-week sabbatical, and in the Lilly Foundation's work on sabbaticals for clergy, they say, what will set your heart on fire? What will get you excited about your work and this ministry and give you renewal and rest and joy and learning? And so it is a balance of all of these things, and it is at the end of the pandemic, and I'm taking Lila with me, and I didn't want to travel alone, and so we went to Greece. By day, we saw temples all over, antiquities everywhere, museums, so many that Lila said, not more ancient stuff. And by night, we were staying on a Disney cruise ship. It was the perfect balance for everybody, even me. And because we were heading to Greece, I had learned all about the goddesses and gods and the mythology and these voices and stories that so influence modern faith and modern life. I was all excited to find Demeter and Persephone. Demeter, this goddess of the harvest and the earth, who brings life, who even in her divinity cannot prevent the assault and taking of her own daughter, but in her divinity is resilient and resolved that she will not rest until she has her back, till even the boys' club has to work out something new with Zeus. I was ready to see Athena, who's supposed to be the virgin goddess, which means virgin not in the sense of biology that we today get obsessed with, but virgin in the sense of a woman belonging to herself. She belongs to herself. And then we were stopping at a place that I didn't even really know much about, but I had taken some history books with me, like you do on a Mediterranean cruise. And I found the Minoan culture. And right there on the page before we were getting off the ship was this beautiful Minoan snake goddess, arms up like this, both of them, which is an attitude of blessing in this ancient culture, breasts proudly out there, and her skirt of 7 layers, just like the 7 days of creation. I read all about her. I risked what my nephew said would get me kicked out of the family text feed, which was I sent them pictures of every page about this palace, this place we were going. They didn't care, but I told them all about it anyway. They're teens, so it's fine. It is this ancient space where they have found this Neolithic space. So what we think of as antiquities and ancient space, this predates Rome and Greece. It is for Rome and Greece, these ancient narratives that got woven into their own. And in all these sites of agrarian communities, in this landscape of Turkey, in this landscape of Greece, in Crete, in Asia, and in the Americas, they find something similar, no matter how far apart they are, which is this primary symbol of a feminine divinity, a celebration of all that she is and her body, large breasts, large bellies, the fullness of her life. They talk about these ancient divinities, and the first scientists who uncovered them, these first scientists, these anthropologists and archaeologists, looked at them in their days of Mad Men era and said, oh, obviously, this is like an ancient Playboy. And they looked at the paintings, these beautiful paintings on the wall that had women talking to each other. And they said, oh, literally in a textbook, This is women's chitter-chatter in the kitchen. The next generation of scientists looked at these same discoveries, and more were being made. And they said this ancient narrative of like a caveman pulling a lady by her hair does not fit. And that these are symbols of divinity, and that they are found in sacred spaces, in homes and sanctuaries for shared worship. They saw this beautiful art that showed women in public spaces, not just private spaces. And they said, oh, this isn't a patriarchy. It's a matriarchy. And then they began to assume that somebody had to dominate somebody else, and that in the matriarchy, the men are subordinate. If only. They weren't. It turns out the next generation of scientists looked at what the generation before them said and said, let's just let the ark and the anthropology and the science speak for itself. It shared this vision of a very equitable culture where men and women shared leadership together. When they look at their art, it is vibrant and beautiful. They have processionals of a priestess or a goddess moving, and everyone's moving together. Women are drumming to the beat of this processional. There are no images of assault. There are no images of one powerful person, like a gallery of kings or queens. There are no images that glorify violence or epic battles or sword-wielding heroes, male or female. The images are of nature. They are agrarian. They are connected to the earth. Anthropologists look at this culture and all they find, and they are astounded at its balance and beauty and how it is built so that you might be connected to the land. The way they know that this community doesn't have sort of an outsized temple or an outsized palace rooms for certain special people, and that certain people have way more than others, is not only because of how they look at the living conditions of people, but how they look at the burials. See, in some of the ancient cultures of what we think as ancient, like Rome and Egypt, the really important people get buried in really important places with all of the best stuff. But in this Minoan culture and in the places around it, people are buried like they are going into a womb. Into pieces of pottery that are large, they are placed in a fetal position. They are painted in red ochre. They are given gifts because their understanding of this sense of God, this sense of the divine, this sense of the goddess, is that she births all of creation, and that when you die, you come back into her. You are received. Her primary symbols that you will see her with are the snakes, because they shed their skin and are made new, butterflies, because they come out of cocoons to flight, birds and cats and all kinds of creatures. There are no images from this culture of hunting animals, but the image of the bull. The bull comes alongside the goddess in all of these images. The horns of the bull are this sacred space of blessing, that these are the animals they first domesticated in these farming communities. They even have this game or this religious ritual where a team of young people, male and female, would leap over a bull, grab its horns, like an ancient pommel horse, I guess, and then into another team's arms. It's this feat of wonder. They celebrated bodies. Bodies were not something to be ashamed of or covered up or hidden away. Menstruation wasn't a problem where you need to go off on your own and be in a tent. It was all about this work of fertility and connection. Her symbols were the snake and the butterfly. Her symbols were the horns of the bull. The symbols included bread that was sacred. The sanctuaries they have found literally have bread ovens next to the altar. The bread isn't baked by some kitchen maid who lives downstairs and never gets to come up like Daisy. The bread is baked and broken and shared with everybody. It is part of celebrating this cycle of nature and presence. Her other symbols include the chalice and the bee, because honey was sacred and it was healing and it was nourishment. And the community of bees fascinated and interest these early people on how they organized life together. And so what happened? There were tribal peoples on the edges, mostly herding or following herds of animals to hunt. And maybe life was a little bit harsher there. And their understanding of God, their divinity, was typically a male god, who was a storm god who wields lightning. I know we've never heard of that. Like Zeus. The Indo-Europeans came in from the north and from the south. The Semitic tribes, of which Judaism is one, come up and they conquest and they conquer these villages and communities. In the northern tribes, what we see as modern Greek mythology, what happens is the goddess gets married to their warrior storm god. This is why Zeus has so many ladies that by consent or not, he partners with and bears children with. This is how they incorporate themselves into the people of the land. The Semitic tribes that come up out of the dry spaces, it's a little more brutal. One of their creation stories includes their god, their storm god, destroying the goddess and building a new world out of her body. In the stories we inherit, we can see what's happening with the snake. The second creation story, because there's two in the Hebrew Bible, which is an epic later, right? The snake is the bad guy. And the lady who listens to the snake, well, she brings all destruction. We see these works throughout Christian history when the Irish saint, Patrick, takes all the snakes out of Ireland. If you go to cathedrals in England, and particularly in places where they removed this earlier tradition, there's usually a statue of the archangel Michael killing a serpent. There's all this effort from the top down to end these early sensitivities of how God brings creativity and life into our context. Walter Brueggemann talks about our Bible in the sense that it is two competing voices, a peaceful, connectivity-oriented God and a warrior presence that we have to choose between, that we have to look for. And even with all of the work over thousands and thousands of years, these images of this understanding of a creative, life-giving God still exist. You can see it in the bread that Jesus lifts up and breaks, in the cup that he asks everyone to share. You can see it in Mary sitting with a child on her lap, just like the images of these ancient divinities, the ways they understood life. We can see it in the presence of honey as healing. Deborah, the judge, the prophetess, she understands this. Her name is the bee. It is an expression of those earlier hints at understanding God in this way. When the Hebrew people are looking for safety and a presence of peace and grace, They are invited to dream of a land of milk and honey. A land of milk and honey echoes those earlier notions of divine love. She is not silenced. There is this space that still resides within our voices and our own tradition. This last part about the snake is that even for all of the spaces of wanting to silence this sensitivity to a creative, life-giving renewal of God and by God, in the wilderness, in a time of struggle, the ancient people look to a snake being lifted up, just like those ancient understandings that predate them. Those voices and stories of life and hope, they get passed down from generation to generation, no matter what the top authorities might say. And so we are invited as well to explore what it might mean for us to be people of peace and connection, to live into a world where the images of relationship are beautiful and life-giving and just. See, the images of sex and sexuality are so different in these Minoan communities compared to the Greek and Roman communities. In these communities, you don't see images like you see in Pompeii, a menu board at a brothel, all the things you can buy, all the people you can have, all the ways that you might want them. Bodies are sacred and they are valued and they are beloved. That is a part of our tradition too. Echoes of empire and control and domination, that is not the only story. And it doesn't have to be who we are. We are called to find so much more. May we have the courage. May it be so. Amen.